You, everybody, for joining us today. My name is Stan Lozinski of Comprehensive Financial, and today we are going to talk about the New York Secure Choice Savings Plan. As many of you may have become aware recently, uh, the law has now been put into effect. This was passed back in 2021. It took about 4 years for New York State to get everything together and get this out to market. So I am going to do a screen share here just to start off and share the slides that we're going to be discussing throughout our presentation. Now, as you are all aware, New York State rolled this particular program out in 2021 when it passed the initial legislation. And then New York City also passed their own legislation. Uh, Basically, the differences were that New York City was going to require employers with at least 5 employees or more to be eligible for this program. New York State had a 10 or more employee rollout. So obviously there were some discrepancies there. And everything that we're reading as of right now is that New York City is going to adhere to the state level program at 10 employees or more. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in detail as we get started here. Uh, as you are all aware, this is also CPE eligible, and we are going to be issuing a credit at the end of the presentation for all that have attended. But because of the CPE requirements, we will be doing some knowledge checks throughout the presentation just to point to that you've attended and we have your answers registered. So it's very important that when the knowledge check does pop up, that you select an answer to show your response that you are actively engaged with the presentation. Um, for those of you that are not familiar with Comprehensive Financial, I know we have a lot of new faces and individuals that are joining us. My firm has been around for over 30 years, and we are an independent financial planning and retirement specialist firm, basically focusing with business owners on their programs, making sure they're maximizing their tax benefits, as well as providing financial planning and wealth management services for their needs. So we are going to walk through now the presentation. And in addition, I am also a certified financial planner and a registered fiduciary. So at all times, we are always putting our client needs first. So always take that away when we have these types of conversations. So we're going to be looking at our agenda today. So why the state plans? Second is going to be, getting into the details of the New York State plan. Then we're going to go through the plan comparisons with the other options that will satisfy the law. Again, looking at the options that are available within the tri-state area. Uh, what's really nice is the fact that we now have startup tax credits that are available for all plans that are initiated after 2020, basically under the Secure Act 1.0 and 2.0. And then we're going to also get into some other considerations and so on, and talk about, again, retirement and how this is basically dealt with on a global basis and where the United States stands in the mix of all this. So we're going to go into our first slide here. And again, as you'll see in the map here, when we look at what states have indicated that they are actively promoting these types of state-sponsored plans, you'll notice that in the darker colors here. And then we have states that have passed the legislation that are going active in the very near future. And then we have other states that have introduced legislation. And then there's only 2 states that have not acted on any of this. And we're going to talk about this in some length here because nationally, there's a crisis going on. A lot of individuals are relying on Social Security to be their primary source of retirement income. That's a problem, particularly if you read any of the Social Security notices that essentially go into the fact that the average person at age 50 only has about $150,000 saved for retirement. And then the fact that Social Security has indicated that at around the year 2033, 2034, they will not have enough money to pay out the benefits that have been promised to individuals. Now, I don't think Social Security is going to go bankrupt. I think the government would have a big problem on its hands if that happened. So it is likely that they will pass legislations to correct a lot of this. And some options may also impact younger generations where they will likely have some changes to when their full retirement age is reflected. Currently, it's at age 67, but we could easily see this push back to 68, 69, or 70. And again, given the reality that by 2033, 2034, Social Security will only be collecting about 75% of what they're required to pay out, adjustments may be inclined for people that are currently collecting on benefits. So again, being very proactive, many states have jumped ahead of this and promoted this type of legislation. Focusing on New York, as you'll see on this slide, only 52%, 52% of the workers in the state do not have access to a qualified retirement plan through their employer. So hence some of the reasoning why this is becoming available at this time. And a recent study by the Federal Reserve in 2021, 25% of national US workers have no retirement savings. And then 40% of the population also feels that they're very much behind. Remember my comment earlier about 50-year-olds only having about 150,000 saved for retirement. We know that's not a lot of money. And again, just dealing with cost of living, inflation, things like that, people are going to need additional income in retirement or have to work further into their retirement years. So a lot of this obviously is important to consider as we walk through this entire program. So again, looking at it and seeing what the New York State plan has offered, you'll see that it's basically an auto enrollment Roth IRA with after-tax contributions going into the plan. As I mentioned earlier, 10 or more employees are what are required. Employers with 10 or more employees are required to offer this to their business and their employees. They would have had to have been in business for at least 2 years, and they currently don't offer an employer-sponsored plan. So again, going back to the comment earlier about New York City, they were originally at 5+ employees. Here, it seems that, from everything that we're reading, it's 10+. If there is additional updates to this, possibly in the near future, I know we're in an election year. This could come up again in 2026, and we will update everyone accordingly should that requirement change. Now, going into some of the choices here within the program, the first thing that jumped out to us was the fact that this was created in 2021, and it took about 4 years for New York to get this rolled out. You may have seen information back in August that New York State has opened up their portal for enrollment into this program. Now, initially, that was indicating that we were going to go for a January 1st start date, which, as we all know, between year-end planning and whatnot with employers, that might have been a little bit of a challenge to get companies to comply with this. So they actually announced 2 weeks ago that they were pushing back these deadlines for eligibility and enrollment. Uh, if you have 30 or more employees in New York State, your requirement was to have this established by March 18th. If you are 15 to 29 employees, you would be May 15th, and then 10 to 14 employees would be as of July 15th. So again, laddering out these deadlines, I think will be very helpful, particularly if you are counseling your clients during tax season. You know, this is something that is going to be right smack in the middle of all that. So again, if you have any questions or need any help with this with your clients, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Now, we're going to go to our knowledge check right now. Uh, and we're going to launch that. So fill in the blank. In New York, businesses with blank or more employees are required to offer an employer-sponsored retirement plan. Okay, everyone's responded. And yes, the correct answer is 10 or more is going to be the ultimate figure here that people will have. So thank you for that. And we're going to continue on here. So after our first knowledge check, let's talk now about the actual plan and the basic features of this program. Now, with any Roth IRA, the contribution limits are going to be the standard limits put out by the IRS every year. And for 2025, it is $7,000 is the uh, contribution limit for anyone that is under age 50. If they are over age 50, they can do the catch-up contribution and bring that up to $8,000. Now, as I mentioned before, it's a Roth IRA, it's auto enrollment. So it's an after-tax contribution into the plan. But the one thing that I will stress is that there is going to be the income eligibility limits applied to this. Now, we'll talk about this a little later, but a 401k does not have that requirement. But on the Roth IRA under the Secure Choice Act, you basically, as a single tax filer, and this is again the 2025 numbers, will be 165,000 or more. They will not be eligible to participate. And if they're married filing jointly, again, the adjusted gross income over 246,000 is the cutoff there of eligibility. So something to keep in mind, given that we are in New York and it's not unusual to see middle management or upper management individuals making incomes in this range, it's important to note that they will not be eligible for the program. Okay. The second part of this is that the New York State plan will integrate with most payroll providers. We've been talking to a lot of the major companies, and they all seem to be on board with this, providing the integration to withhold the contributions from an employee's payroll and remitting that to the state. The payroll companies will charge for this. Companies can do this on their own if they choose. But that we find also leaves them open to some liability if contributions are not processed at every pay period, which is a standard requirement with all qualified plans. And again, going back to auto enrollment, this is an important feature that really needs to be communicated well to all participants. And particularly if there is some language barriers, we work with a lot of hospitality and things like that. And in that industry, we find there's a lot of Latino population, Asian, and so on at various restaurants and whatnot and hotels. So it's very important that prior to rolling any of this out, whether you're going with the New York State plan or even a 401k type product, understanding that this is auto enrollment, notices are going to have to be sent out at least 30 days in advance that on X date, this percentage of money will be withheld. And the program for New York State is requiring a minimum of 3% for that option. Now, very important when we see these things communicated in the past with 401k plans, and we see, employees that just simply ignore the notifications and the communication that's been made to them, and they do not go through what we call a negative election, meaning they don't want to be part of this and they have to notify the employer and payroll company to that effect, stating do not start withholding the money. Or if they do want to enroll, they can change their contribution amounts. But if they have not given a negative election and that first payroll comes along and they see that deduction being taken out, there is a corrective period generally open to all plans that they would have up to 60 days to reverse these contributions. So just be aware of that. There is that window, but it is narrow. It's 2 months after that first payroll is run that they can make these corrective actions. After that time, the plan is in place for that individual. And if they wanted to drop out afterwards, they can stop their contributions. But if they wanted to pull that money back, it may be subject to taxes and a penalty if they are under the age of 59 and a half. It's the standard IRA early distribution rules that do apply to this. So keeping that in mind at all times is very important. Now, comparing the plan, the Secure Choice program, to a standard 401k, the first thing is, again, what kind of type of plan? It is a state-sponsored Roth IRA plan. A 401k is an employer-sponsored plan. And again, this is qualified, meaning you can do pre-tax and post-tax contributions similar to the Roth. The plan setup, again, automatically established. Companies can enroll their employees into the state-sponsored plan. If we were going down the 401k route, we would again have this set up with an advisor. The plan can be customized with various eligibility periods. You can have waiting periods up to 1 year if chosen. You can do a matching contribution or not. There's a lot of features and benefits also with the 401k that also become very beneficial, which we'll touch on in a minute. As far as administration, the state-sponsored plan is pretty straightforward. As long as we've eliminated any of those highly compensated employees that are not eligible based on their income eligibility, as long as the money is being deducted each pay period and remitted to the state plan, that's fine. On the 401k, obviously, it does get a little bit more involved because it is subject to ERISA. So there is compliance and some monitoring that is required as far as the investment choices and things along those lines, as well as discrimination testing and top-heavy testing. But there are solutions to that can be customized for an individual business that can eliminate most or if not all of that issue. And then again, the employer duties, again, just making sure the payroll is being handled appropriately with the deductions and the deductions being remitted. Again, with a 401k, similar story. Again, in both situations, we encourage employers to always look at the payroll company integration with the 401k or the Secure Choice program. You want as little manual interaction per pay period, having these monies that are being withheld remitted to the retirement plan. So again, very important in that aspect. Now going into the employer costs. Within the New York plan, there is only the basic cost for the investments that are being chosen. There is no additional fees that are charged. 401ks do have startup costs, typically with setting up the plan documents and then again, first year's administration and so on. But we'll touch on in a few minutes the Secure Choice Act, excuse me, Secure Act. There's so many secure names floating around here. The Secure Act 1.0 actually offers up to 3 years of tax credits for employers with less than 100 employees, which we'll talk about in a minute, that offset the majority, if not all, of those startup costs. And then we look at, again, the employee contributions. Again, the Roth IRA has its limitations of 7,000 or 8,000 if over age 50. And again, income eligibility limits do apply. With the 401k, you can do a pre-tax contribution, which is considered a traditional 401k, where if someone is in a high tax bracket, they get the benefit of that tax deduction for the contribution. The majority of people, when they do hit retirement, tend to be in a lower tax bracket. So that can make a lot of sense. But again, if someone did want to do the Roth contribution limit or contributions, they can. And it is subject to the same limits as of regular 401k, where they can go up to, in 2025, for example, up to 23,500. If over age 50, up to 31,000. And then there's also a special window for additional catch-up contributions between the age of 60 and 63 that allows them to go to $34,750. Now, we'll talk about a little bit of that in a second, but as you may be also aware that in 2026, legislation was passed that on the federal level, if an employee is considered highly compensated, and for this year it's 155,000 or more of income that's being shown as their wages. If they are doing the 23,000 salary deferral under a 401k and they're over age 50 and they want to do The additional catch-up contributions, as you're seeing here on the screen, over age 50, it's 31,000, or 60 to 63, it goes up to 34,750. If they want to do those contributions, it is automatically going to be coded into a Roth contribution after tax, not pre-tax. The 23,500 can be pre-tax, but again, anything above that level for catch-up contributions, if this is a highly compensated person, will be put into a Roth bucket, and again, be a post-tax contribution. As far as employer matches, under the Roth program with New York State, there are no matching contributions permitted. On the 401k, yes, there are options for this. It is not mandatory, but it is a great tool for recruiting and retaining key employees and so on, creating an incentive for people to be part of the plan and staying with a particular company. Now, going into the investment choices within the program, the state basically has put together a limited list of funds. They're basically what we call target date funds, which are based on an individual's age currently and when they reach age 65. So, for example, they come in 5-year increments. There's 2020, 2025, 30, 40, and so on. So, if I was a 40-year-old and I was looking at the plan option that would get me to age 65, I would be looking at 25 years in the future, or I would elect the 2050 fund. And what that basically does today, because it tracks the risk within the portfolio. So today, when I'm younger, that portfolio would have about 80 to 90% of it invested in stock. The other 10 to 20% would be in bonds or cash. And then as I got older and closer to that year 2050, when I'm going to be 65, every couple of years, the amount of stock in the portfolio would be reducing and the amount of bonds would be increasing. So again, as you reach closer to retirement, the portfolio has more bonds in the mix, generally about 60% at that time, reducing the risk and creating more income that would be generated for someone to retire and start to draw income off of their investments. So that's typically how these types of plans would be run, and with the target date funds. Target date funds are very common in retirement plans. We see them and use them all the time. About 90% of the population uses a target date in their 401k. So just being aware of that. But within the 401k, beyond a target date portfolio, we can build out multiple options as far as the investment choices. You can have a choice of just about any sector of the market, small, mid, large companies. You can get international. You can invest in growth stocks, value stocks. You can get generally more oriented towards technology if you're looking at, some of the run-ups that we've had over the last few years with technology stocks. But you can also be very conservative with value type stocks. Again, the advisor for the plan will be available at all times to explain this to the participants. And also, generally through the 401k, there is a lot of education available. But in our firm, we always make ourselves available for one-on-one consultations with all the participants at that time. With regards to the ongoing educational aspect of this, under the state-sponsored plan, there really is none provided. There's a website you can refer to that gives you some good generic information. But again, ongoing support and education is provided under the 401k options, generally from the advisor. So giving, again, more reinforcement of this being an employee benefit for the employees of that particular company. Access to the money. Now, generally, a loan is not available on a Roth IRA. So under the state-sponsored plan, if you're in the plan and you needed to take money out of the plan, as I mentioned earlier, the IRS early distribution rules do apply. So if someone is under age 59 and a half and they start pulling money out, any of the growth of the money might be subject to taxation, depending on that individual. And also, when you start thinking about, the penalty phase, if someone is under 59 and a half, there's that 10% IRS penalty. So something to keep in mind there. With a 401k, there are loan features, and an individual can withdraw up to 50% of their vested account balance. Generally, that's always available to them. Minimum loan is $1,000, so someone would have to have at least 2,000 in their account vested, and they can go up to 50,000 if they have a large balance. And again, they would have to have at least 100 in the account to get a $50,000 loan. As with any loan under a 401k, any of the interest that is charged goes 100% back to the participant's account. So they never lose anything per se in that situation. But the big key factor here is that they're not paying any taxes and there is no penalties. If someone also, though, needed access to the funds and they did not want to go through a loan, generally a 401k would also provide what they call a hardship withdrawal. And that could be for numerous reasons: extreme medical expenses, funeral expenses, things along those lines. I'm being evicted from my home. They can access their 401k account. But again, if they're under 59 and a half, it would be any distribution would be subject to the 10% penalty plus the income taxes on any of the gains within the portfolio. And also potentially the entire principal of the account, depending on whether they were pre-tax or post-tax. So some basic considerations there when it comes to accessibility. And when it comes to the customization aspect of all this, the state plan is basically a cookie cutter plan. It's a one size fits all. There are no options or other things that you can build into it. So it is just a basic Roth IRA. Obviously, the 401k, we can customize with a lot of various features, bells and whistles, the investment choices, things along those lines, matching contributions, and so on. So again, a lot more flexibility with the 401k platform. Now, the other option that is important to consider is a simple IRA. Now, these have been around for a while. And, when you start looking at all of the various choices within the simple IRA, the first one comes down to comparing the costs. For the choice plan, obviously, there is no cost. It's just basically implementing the payroll deductions and so on with your payroll provider, or if someone is doing this manually. A simple IRA, though, has no basic costs when it comes to the setup of the plan. It is by nature a very simple procedure. The individual cost factors are really just talking about the IRA fee that a particular mutual fund family or a bank would charge for that. Generally, that's between $20 to $50, depending on the vendor. Now, the other side of this, though, is that a simple IRA does have a mandatory matching contribution that is required. So at its most basic, it is a 3% dollar for dollar match. So at the first 3% of wages that are contributed by a participant, the company, the employer, would match that 3%. If the employee went higher on their contributions to 10% and so on, they're capped out at a 3% match there. So it's a very generous match. It's always 100% vested. But sometimes this can be a challenge for small companies if they have a tough year. So the IRS does allow for any 2-year period out of 5 that an individual company can reduce that matching contribution down to 1%. They can't say zero, but they can drop it down to 1%. And again, they can do this for up to any 2 years within a 5-year period. Otherwise, it has to be a 3% match. Now, there is another feature that the simple IRAs happen, and they call it a non-elective contribution. And basically, regardless of whether an employee is participating, the business is going to be providing a 2% contribution for all employees, whether they're doing the salary deferrals or not. So sometimes an employer will opt for that. It's not mandatory, but again, if someone is just focusing on employees that want to be part of the plan and matching their contributions, that's generally the direction we see most of them taking. Now, when it comes to the education, again, very similar to the 401k that we talked about before. The New York State plan, really none is provided beyond some basics on their website. Because the simple IRA is typically advisor driven, you will see support from the advisor providing that educational consultation with the participants. And again, that can be one-on-one or in a group setting, whatever is appropriate for the business. Again, investment options. Again, with the state plan, it's generally limited to the target date funds and some other basic options. The simple IRA, generally, depending on the investments within the fund family, you could have 15, 20, 30 options very easily made available within that group. There's plenty of companies out there that offer this, American Funds, Fidelity, Invesco, and so on. So again, these platforms have a lot of choices when it comes to the investments. Again, looking at the employee contributions, on the state-sponsored plan, it is always going to be the Roth or after-tax contributions. The simple IRA will allow for the pre-tax or the Roth option. And again, no income limitations on the Roth contribution under the simple. The state plan contribution limits, again, 7,000 and 8,000 if someone is over age 50. The simple IRA has actually just about double that when it comes to the basic contribution level maximum at $16,500. If someone is over age 50, they can go to 20,000. And again, with that special catch-up feature, if you're between the ages of 60 to 63, you can go to 21,750. The employer matching, again, just talking about that, not permitted under the state plan. But again, with the simple IRA, there is a 1 or a 3% matching option available. Again, the 3% being the most common, and the 1% just being a default if there is a tough couple of years within any 5-year period. Now we're going to go back to our knowledge check here. And knowledge check 2. What is the contribution limit on the New York State Secure Choice IRA for a participant who is 35 years old? Great job. You're correct. So under the New York State Secure Choice Roth IRA plan, the contribution limit for someone 35 is $7,000. So good job there. Majority of you got that correct. So now again, going into our next option here is really talking about the startup tax credits. So there's two basic options that are available here, and these really apply only to a 401k or a simple IRA plan. So in 2019, the Secure Act 1.0 was passed, and this basically gives a tax credit based on the administrative costs for the plan. In 2022, they enhanced that with 2.0, basically giving employers a credit on the contributions or matching contributions, I should say, to the plan. So getting into some detail here for the 1.0. For the first 3 years of a company's initial retirement plan. So basically, the startup tax credits cover the majority of these costs based on the administration and the annual plan limit. If you have 50 or fewer employees, it basically covers up to 100% up to $5,000. If it's 50 to 100, it gives you half of the credit, 50%, but again, up to the maximum of $5,000. So it's pretty straightforward here. And this has been actually a very popular feature that we've encouraged all of our clients that are and have initiated plans after 2020 to really share this with their accountant and make sure that they're getting these credits. When it comes to the Secure Act 2.0, generally, again, it's available for the first 5 years of a company's initial plan, and it gradually decreases the credit of up to $1,000 per employee earning under $100,000 or less. So it's available basically for 401k, SEP, and simple plans as long as there are 100 or less employees. And the credit basically phases out over the 5-year period. The first couple of years, they give you the 100% credit. After year 3, it's 75%. Year 4, it's 50%. And then year 5, it's 25%. So again, gradually decreasing over that 5-year period. Larger plans with 50 to 100 employees generally follow the same phase down, but the credit is reduced 2% for each employee beyond 50. So a little bit of math involved there. And if someone has questions about that, please reach out to us and we can follow up on all that with you. And again, the basic requirements here, no more than 100 employees. And again, the limit on the administrative aspect of this is $5,000 or more in the preceding year. And the employer did not sponsor a plan for a significant portion of the same employees in the prior 3 years. So those are basic requirements here. Um, Again, $5,000 or more of compensation and 100 or less employees. And again, they didn't sponsor a plan in the prior 3 years. Now, talking about these types of plans, we know also that the last couple of years, we've seen not only New York obviously trying to enact this, but New Jersey came live with their state-sponsored plan in 2024. Their minimum is 25 or more employees. And again, businesses for at least 2 years. Connecticut started in April of 2022. Again, with their requirement is five or more, and the business has to have been in existence for at least 2 years. So those are the basic requirements when we start to look outside of the New York tri-state area. Some of you may have clients that cross over into these areas, so just being aware of this, that's a requirement on their end. Now let's just go to our last knowledge check here. Hold on. This is, and here we go. True or false, the Secure Act 1.0, started in 2019, has planned tax credits offered for 5 years. True or false? Okay. Mixed results here. The answer here is 3 years. The Secure Act 1.0 gives you the tax credit for administrative startup costs for the first 3 years. The 2.0, started in 2022, gives you the choice of the employer contribution tax credit, and that is phased out over 5 years. So thank you very much. Uh, and just going on to our final considerations here as we talk through all of these points. Again, the biggest factors here is the employer contributions, and that's where I think a lot of employers want to have some guidance on this and do some of the math on whether it makes sense for them to go into a 401k or a simple IRA type plan with salary deferrals and potentially providing a matching contribution, or keep it simple with the Secure Choice program. Obviously, if the employer is providing these types of incentives and they're getting some tax credits back for that, it makes it very palatable and again, boosts your employee recruitment, morale, and retention. So some very big factors there. Payroll integration. Again, manual reduces the need for these manual uploads. This is again the area where we see the most errors occurring with an employer if they're doing this manually every pay period, particularly if you have a large group of employees that are participating. So again, very important to understand that. And again, do you want to burden your accounting area within the business with this as a requirement every pay period? So again, minimizing the errors and keeps the plan aligned with the regulations. And this is important whether it's the state-sponsored plan or a 401k. The majority of employers out there do engage with some payroll company. Uh, some people will use the QuickBooks payroll. That does also have an integration feature. So the majority of the platforms out there will have some form of integration with these platforms. And lastly is the contribution limits. Again, making the employees aware of what their options are. If you're going to the state-sponsored plan, again, that is capped at $7,000 and it's an after-tax contribution only. $8,000 if they're over age 50. Obviously, the simple IRA and the 401k have more than double to triple those levels. And again, when people look at the option of being able to go pre-tax or post-tax, remembering that in New York State, we are in a high tax state. So having the ability to do the contributions on a pre-tax basis for the participants can be an important piece of the pie here that when considering the options as an employer may make sense and again boost again that morale and the emphasis on the employee having some control over some of this. So again, very important in those aspects. And then again, looking at this from other countries and where the United States rank, obviously we have our Social Security, but when you really look at types of plans that are out there, the majority of other countries utilize a defined contribution plan where both the employee and employer are making contributions into this fund. Social Security is exactly that, but the way it's being managed and so on is a big issue. And as we all know, back in the 70s when Richard Nixon moved the Social Security Trust Fund over into the general budget so they could balance the budget, they basically have been funding this with a periodic series of IOUs over the years. So we see the issue, and that is going to start to materialize itself at around 2033, 2034, which is hence the reason why they're encouraging these types of additional plans to be mandated at the state level. When we look at how the United States has fared versus all the other countries in the world, generally, out of all the developed countries, we're ranking about a C plus, which is about 29th out of 48. And this was a poll that was done last year. Um, we rely on a very heavy voluntary system for savings, and defined benefit plans are not as popular as they used to be. When you start talking about union pensions and so on, realize only about 10% of the population in the United States has access to something like that. So again, looking at what is really happening out there with having access to these plans, particularly in New York State, where only about 52% of 52% of the population do not have access to these types of plans. Hence the requirement and why we're having these conversations now and these laws enacted. If you look at the Dutch system, that is a very highly rated program. And again, employer and employee contributions at all levels. So again, just talking this through and realizing what some of the issues are in the United States, this is obviously where we are challenged at some level and requiring these types of programs to be promoted. And after that, just want to say thank you. I appreciate everyone's time today. Anyone that has registered for the program today, that is registered as a CPA and wanting to get the credit, certificates will be issued this week and sent out to you directly. But if you do have any questions in the meantime, please don't hesitate to reach out to me, and we're always available to help you with any questions at any time. Thank you and have a great day. Bye-bye now.